The emergency alarm screamed through the crystal corridors of the Galactic Council headquarters as Admiral Kale sprinted toward the command center. His boots echoed against the polished floors, while panicked voices filled the air around him. Officers from dozens of different alien species rushed past, their faces showing the same expression of terror that had been spreading across the galaxy for the past hour. His aide, Rix, a small creature with 6 trembling arms, nearly dropped the datapad as he handed over the sensor readings. The Vorton's usually steady voice cracked with fear as he spoke. "Sir, the vessel from the Sol system has crossed the outer marker. The size readings are—" "They must be wrong. Our computers show it's 3 times larger than our flagship Dominion." Admiral Kale grabbed the datapad with his scaled hands, his yellow eyes widening as he read the impossible numbers. The ship was not just large, it was beyond anything they had ever encountered. Their most powerful dreadnoughts looked like fighter craft, compared to this monster approaching from the forbidden solar system. Through the massive viewing portal that dominated the command center, they could see the dark shape growing larger against the starfield. The human vessel moved with a grace that seemed impossible for something so massive. Its hull was unlike anything in their databases, made from some unknown metal that seemed to drink in the light from nearby stars rather than reflect it. "How many weapons systems can you detect?" Kyle asked, though he already feared the answer. Rix consulted his instruments, his 6 arms working frantically over the controls. "That's the problem, sir. Our scanners can't penetrate their hull. We're getting nothing. No energy signatures, no weapon ports, no shield generators. It's like they're invisible to our technology." The Admiral felt a chill run down his spine. For 800 years, the Galactic Council had maintained a strict quarantine around the Sol system. They knew the third planet harbored intelligent life, aggressive bipeds who seemed to enjoy warfare, but their technology had appeared primitive. Their radio signals suggested they were barely capable of spaceflight. Now staring at the approaching vessel, Kyle realized they had made a terrible mistake. Captain Lee Min-ho stood on the bridge of the human battleship Vengeance, his dark eyes studying the formation of alien ships arrayed before them. At 52 years old, his face carried the lines of someone who had seen too much conflict, but his expression remained completely calm. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations, with quiet efficiency, their movements precise and professional. The bridge itself was a marvel of human engineering. Holographic displays showed 3-dimensional maps of the surrounding space, tracking every alien vessel within a 100,000-kilometer radius. The air hummed with the subtle vibrations of the ship's massive engines, powerful enough to move. Their 3-kilometer-long vessel, at speeds that would make alien physicists question their understanding of the universe. Lieutenant Park Soo-jin, his tactical officer, monitored the incoming communications with the focused attention of a predator, watching prey. Her fingers danced across the holographic interface as she sorted through the flood of alien transmissions. "Captain, they're broadcasting on 17 different frequencies now," she reported, her voice steady despite the historic nature of the moment. "Standard diplomatic protocols, demands for identification, threats of military action if we don't comply with their quarantine laws." Lee's weathered face showed the hint of a smile. After decades of preparation, of watching and waiting while the galaxy dismissed humanity as primitive savages, this moment felt almost anticlimactic. "Let them wait, Lieutenant," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to command. "Fear is an excellent teacher, and they have much to learn." Through the massive view screen that dominated the front of the bridge, they could see the alien fleets maintaining their distance. Hundreds of ships from dozens of different species, all armed and ready for battle, but none daring to make the first move. Their weapon systems were powered up, energy readings spiking across the spectrum, but something held them back. Commander Kim Yun-seo, the ship's science officer, looked up from her station with satisfaction. "Captain, their sensors are completely ineffective against our hull plating. They can't detect our weapon systems, our shield generators, or even our crew complement. To them, we're a complete mystery." The irony wasn't lost on Lee. While the aliens had spent centuries assuming humans were too primitive to pose a threat, human scientists had been developing technologies that made their most advanced systems look like stone tools. The metamaterial hull that surrounded the Vengeance didn't just absorb light and sensor beams, it actively redirected them, making the massive ship appear as nothing more than empty space to most detection systems. "Sir," Park reported, "I'm detecting increased chatter among their command vessels. They're scared, and they had good reason to be." The alien fleets that had gathered to intercept the human vessel represented the combined military might of 17 different species. Their weapons could turn planets into dust. Their shields could withstand the direct hit of a star-going supernova. But faced with a completely unknown enemy, all their technological superiority meant nothing. For the first time in galactic history, an entire civilization held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The humans had arrived. Nothing would ever be the same. The silence stretched across space like a held breath. For 3 long galactic hours, the massive human battleship hung motionless in the void, while alien fleets surrounded it at a respectful distance. Every sensor array in the combined fleet was focused on the dark vessel, but their instruments revealed nothing. The ship remained as mysterious as when it first appeared. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Captain Lee sat calmly in his command chair, watching the alien formations through the main view screen. His crew worked quietly at their stations, monitoring everything. They had waited decades for this moment, and a few more hours meant nothing. Lieutenant Park looked up from her console, where streams of alien communications scrolled past in dozens of different languages. "Captain, their chatter is increasing. I'm detecting panic on at least 12 different command frequencies. Some of their smaller vessels are requesting permission to withdraw." Lee nodded slowly. "Let them sweat a little longer. When someone has underestimated you for centuries, the reveal should be memorable." Finally, he stood and straightened his uniform. The moment had come to shatter every assumption the galaxy held about humanity. "Open a communication channel to all vessels," he ordered. "Full spectrum broadcast." The communications officer's fingers moved across his holographic controls. "Channel open, sir. You're broadcasting to over 1,000 alien vessels across 17 different species." Lee's image suddenly appeared on screens throughout the alien fleet. Bridge commanders who had been pacing nervously stopped mid-step. Crew members turned from their stations to stare at the first human they had ever seen. His weathered face appeared calm and confident, his dark eyes studying them with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. "This is Captain Lee Min-ho of the Earth vessel Vengeance," he said, his words spoken in perfect galactic standard, without any trace of accent. "We've been listening to your transmissions for quite some time." The shock was immediate. Not only was the human speaking their universal language, but he spoke it better than some species who had used it for millennia. His pronunciation was flawless, his grammar perfect. On the bridge of the Council flagship Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kyle felt his blood turn cold. The human had been listening to their communications. For how long? What had they learned? Fighting. To maintain his authority, Kyle stepped forward where his own image would be transmitted back to the human vessel. His scaled face showed the confidence of someone who had commanded fleets for over 2 centuries. "Human vessel, you are in direct violation of Quarantine Protocol 847, he declared, his voice carrying the authority of the Galactic Council. "Return to your system immediately, or face the full consequences of galactic law." Captain Lee's expression didn't change by even the slightest degree. If anything, his eyes seemed to grow more amused. He tilted his head slightly, as if considering something mildly interesting. "Consequences?" he repeated, his tone suggesting genuine curiosity. He turned slightly and nodded to Lieutenant Park at her tactical station. Park's hands moved across her controls with practiced efficiency. Suddenly, every screen on every alien vessel displayed something that made their commanders step backward in shock. Detailed technical schematics filled their displays, showing the internal layout of their ships with impossible accuracy. The humans possessed complete blueprints of vessels that were classified at the highest levels. Engine specifications that only the original designers should know. Weapon system layouts that were state secrets. Shield generator patterns that had never been shared outside each species' military command. "We've been studying your consequences for decades," Lee continued conversationally, as if discussing the weather rather than revealing intelligence that should have been impossible to obtain. Every weakness, every design flaw, every tactical limitation. Your ships are quite impressive, but they do have some interesting vulnerabilities. Ex-Admiral Kale felt his legs go weak. The humans knew everything. The technical readouts scrolling across his screens showed details that even he wasn't supposed to have access to. How was this possible? While you assumed we were primitive, Lee continued, his voice carrying across space to thousands of alien ears, we were learning. Every signal you transmitted into space, every diplomatic exchange between your species, every military communication you thought was secure, we intercepted it all. Commander Kim Yun-seo looked up from her science station. Captain, shall I demonstrate? Our understanding of their technology. Lee nodded once. Proceed, Commander, something subtle but memorable. Kim's fingers danced across her controls, activating systems that existed beyond alien understanding. Deep within the Vengeance, the power cores that bent the laws of physics channeled energy through crystalline matrices that human scientists had perfected in secret. A thin beam of coherent energy, invisible to most sensors, lanced out from the human battleship. It traveled across space with perfect precision, reaching the surface of a nearby moon that hung in the system. The energy beam began to move in careful patterns, carving into the rocky surface with surgical accuracy. Within minutes, the Galactic Council's own insignia appeared on the moon's surface, carved with such precision that it could be seen clearly from thousands of kilometers away. The carving was perfect, every line and curve exact. But what terrified the alien observers was the control it demonstrated. The beam had carved through solid rock as easily as a knife through soft butter, yet it had done so with artistic precision. We know your languages, Lee continued, his calm voice a stark contrast to the panic spreading through the alien fleets. We know your cultures, your histories, your political structures. We know which species harbor old grudges against each other, which alliances are strong and which are fragile. We know your fears. The last word hung in space like a physical thing. Throughout the alien fleet, commanders looked at each other with new understanding. If the humans knew their fears, they knew everything. Lee stepped closer to his view screen, his image growing larger on alien displays throughout the fleet. His expression remained perfectly calm, but his words carried the weight of absolute certainty. Now, he said, his voice soft but carrying clearly across the communication channels, shall we discuss new terms? Admiral Kyle stood frozen on the bridge of his flagship as emergency alerts began flooding in from across the galaxy. The confident demeanor he had maintained for the past hour cracked like glass as his communications officer, a tall, blue-skinned Zephyrian, turned toward him, with pure terror in her 4 eyes. Admiral, we're receiving priority distress signals from 17 different sectors, she reported, her usually steady voice shaking. The fortress at Kelvar Prime has gone completely silent. Our last transmission showed everything normal then. Nothing. Kale's scaled hands gripped the armrests of his command chair until his knuckles turned white. Kelvar Prime was supposed to be impregnable. The massive space fortress guarded the primary shipping lanes in the outer rim, protected by energy shields that could withstand direct hits from supernovas. It housed 50,000 personnel and enough firepower to destroy entire solar systems. His aide Rick scurried up to him, all 6 arms trembling as he held multiple data pads. Sir, it's not just Kelvar Prime. We're getting reports from across the galaxy. Mining stations, communication relays, research facilities. They're just disappearing. On the main view screen, Captain Lee's image watched their growing panic with what could only be described as cold amusement. His weathered face showed no emotion as he observed the alien commanders realizing the true scope of what they faced. Did you really think we sent only 1 ship? Lee asked, his voice carrying a tone of mild disappointment as if explaining something obvious to a child. While your attention was focused here on this single vessel, my species has been quite busy elsewhere. Lieutenant Park's fingers moved across her tactical display, and suddenly the main screen shifted to show a 3-dimensional hologram of the entire galaxy. At first it looked normal, with the usual patterns of trade routes, military installations, and populated systems marked in soft blue light. Then the red dots began to appear, one by one, like drops of blood spreading across the galactic map. Red markers appeared at strategic locations throughout known space, mining stations that produced rare metals essential for alien technology, communication relays that connected distant worlds, military outposts that guarded important sectors, research facilities where their most advanced weapons were developed. Admiral Kale felt his blood turn to ice as he realized what he was seeing. Every red dot represented a target that had been eliminated or captured. The pattern wasn't random, it was surgical. The humans had identified every critical piece of galactic infrastructure and systematically removed it. "This is impossible," whispered Commander Thex, a reptilian officer whose species had served in the Galactic Fleet for over 3 centuries. "Our early warning systems would have detected any large-scale movement. Our sensors cover every major shipping lane." Captain Lee's smile grew slightly wider, though it never reached his eyes. "Your sensors are quite impressive," he agreed. "Unfortunately for you, they were designed to detect known technology. Human vessels use principles that your scientists haven't even theorized yet." Lieutenant Park continued manipulating her display, zooming in on specific sectors to show the extent of the human operations. Each red dot expanded to show detailed information about what had been captured or destroyed. The scope was breathtaking. "For months, human operatives have walked among you," Lee explained, his tone conversational despite the devastating information. He was revealing. "Your security protocols were inadequate. We've been inside your command centers, monitoring your communications. We've been in your research facilities, copying your data. We've been in your homes, learning about your families, your cultures, your weaknesses." The alien commanders looked at each other with growing horror. If human agents had been operating undetected for months, what else had they learned? What other operations were still ongoing? Rix dropped one of his data pads, the device clattering, on the deck as his 6 arms shook uncontrollably. "Sir, the communication relay at Nexus Station just went offline. That's our primary link to the core worlds." Before Admiral Kale could respond, Commander Kim's voice came clearly through the communication channel from the human vessel. "Captain, the second wave is in position." Lee nodded once, and suddenly space around the alien fleet began to shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The distortion effect spread across hundreds of cubic kilometers, and then the impossible happened. Dozens of human warships simply materialized out of empty space. They appeared simultaneously around key positions throughout the alien formation, their dark hulls becoming visible as their cloaking systems deactivated. Each vessel was sleek and predatory, designed for stealth and precision strikes. They had been there all along, invisible and patient, studying their targets like wolves watching a herd of prey. The alien sensors, which had detected nothing moments before, suddenly screamed with new contacts. The human ships weren't just nearby, they were in perfect attack positions, their weapons already trained on vital systems of the alien vessels. "Cloaking technology," breathed Commander Thex. "But that's impossible. Our scientists proved that true invisibility violates the fundamental laws of physics." Captain Lee's expression remained perfectly calm as he watched the alien fleet realize how completely they had been outmaneuvered. "Your scientists made assumptions based on limited understanding. Human physics has moved beyond such restrictions." Admiral Kale finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "How many ships do you have?" "Enough," Lee replied simply. "You see, Admiral, humans don't simply fight. We hunt. And the hunt began long before we revealed ourselves." The truth was becoming clear to every alien commander in the fleet. While they had been focused on the single human battleship, an entire invasion force had been operating in the shadows. Their most secure installations had been under observation for weeks. Their communications had been monitored, their movements tracked, their strategies analyzed. Lieutenant Park activated another display showing real-time feeds from across the galaxy. Alien installations that had been dark on the map suddenly showed signs of human occupation. Personnel were being processed, technology was being studied, and critical infrastructure was being secured. "Your fleets, your weapons, your defensive positions," Lee continued. "We've been watching all of it. Every tactical advantage you thought you possessed has been neutralized by an enemy that learned to be invisible, to be patient, and to strike with precision rather than brute force. The alien fleets found themselves surrounded not just by visible human vessels, but by the growing realization that they had never been in control of this situation. From the moment the first human ship appeared, possibly even before that, they had been prey in a hunt that was already over. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you underestimated humanity's greatest weapon, their ability to plan, to wait, and to strike when their enemies least expected it. The galaxy's greatest armada stretched across space like a metal ocean. Over 3,000 warships from 17 different species had converged on the human position, their combined firepower capable of turning entire star systems into dust. Massive dreadnoughts from the Corvani Empire sat alongside sleek battle cruisers from the Zephyrian Federation. Ancient war machines from the Vortan Collective hummed with deadly energy next to the crystalline vessels of the Ethereal Republic. Admiral Kyle stood on the bridge of his flagship, surrounded by holographic displays showing the formation of his combined fleet. For the first time since the humans had appeared, he felt a surge of confidence. No force in galactic history had ever assembled this much destructive power in one place. "All ships report ready for combat," announced his tactical officer. "Energy weapons charged, kinetic bombardment systems armed, and defensive shields at maximum power." Through his viewscreen, Kyle could see the dark shape of the human battleship hanging motionless in space, seemingly unimpressed by the massive force arrayed against it. A few dozen other human vessels floated nearby, tiny compared to the alien armada, but somehow still menacing in their silence. Captain Lee stood calmly on the bridge of the Vengeance, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the approaching fleet through his main display. His crew worked quietly at their stations, their movements precise and unhurried despite the overwhelming odds they faced. "Impressive," he murmured to Lieutenant Park, who was monitoring the alien formations. "They've assembled quite a collection of museum pieces." Park looked up from her tactical display, where detailed analyses of every alien vessel scrolled past in real time. "Captain, our AI has identified optimal target points on all enemy vessels, their shield generators, weapon systems, and command. Centers are all clearly marked." Lee nodded slowly. The time for subtlety had passed. Now the galaxy would learn the true difference between human and alien approaches to warfare. "Lieutenant Park, begin the demonstration," he ordered, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Yes, sir." Park's fingers moved across her holographic controls with practiced efficiency. Throughout the human fleet, communication systems that had been silently monitoring alien frequencies for months suddenly activated with overwhelming power. Across the massive alien armada, every communication system activated simultaneously. Bridge speakers crackled to life, personal communicators buzzed, and emergency channels opened without authorization. But instead of the expected human demands for surrender, something far more disturbing began to play. The aliens heard their own voices, Admiral. Kale stepped backward in shock as his own private conversations began broadcasting through his ship's communication system. Personal discussions with his family, secret military briefings, private fears he had shared with his closest advisors. The recordings were perfect, captured with such clarity that even he couldn't tell the difference. But it wasn't just his voice. Throughout the fleet, thousands of alien officers heard their most private moments being broadcast. Military secrets they thought were secure personal communications with loved ones. Embarrassing failures they hoped were forgotten. The humans had been listening to everything. "Command frequency," one of the alien communications officers reported in panic. "They're broadcasting on every channel simultaneously. We can't block it." The recordings weren't random. They were carefully selected to cause maximum psychological impact. Species that had ancient grievances against each other heard their enemies' private mocking comments. Military commanders heard their subordinates' real opinions of their leadership. Political leaders heard their allies planning to betray them. Captain Lee's voice cut through the chaos, broadcasting on every frequency across the massive fleet. "You studied us from afar for centuries," he said, his tone carrying the weight of absolute certainty. But we studied you from within. Every conversation, every secret, every hidden shame. We know you better than you know yourselves. Commander Kim looked up from her weapons console, where displays showed power levels that should have been impossible. Captain, primary weapon systems are fully charged. Shall I engage the phase generators? Proceed, Commander, Lee replied, calmly. The Vengeance began to shimmer like a mirage, its massive hull becoming translucent as it activated technology that broke the fundamental rules of physics. The 3-kilometer-long battleship started to phase in and out of normal space. Existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously, alien sensors went crazy as the human vessel began passing through solid matter as if it didn't exist. Energy beams from the Vengeance lanced out with surgical precision, targeting specific systems on key alien command ships. But these weren't destructive blasts. They were precision strikes that disabled vital systems without causing casualties. Admiral Kyle watched in horror as his flagship's primary weapons array simply stopped working. The energy beam had passed through his ship's hull without leaving a mark, but somehow it had fried every circuit in their main armament. Around him, other command vessels reported similar impossible attacks. Shields are useless, reported his tactical officer, his voice barely controlled. Their weapons are bypassing our defenses completely. They're not even touching our hulls, but our systems are failing throughout the fleet. Other human vessels revealed equally impossible technologies. Weapons that somehow identified specific genetic markers began targeting alien crew members, rendering entire populations unconscious while leaving their ships completely intact. The aliens simply collapsed at their stations, alive but unconscious, while their vessels drifted helplessly. Lieutenant Park activated another system that had been decades in development. Across the human fleet, tactical AI systems began predicting alien movements with terrifying accuracy. Every course correction, every weapons adjustment, every defensive maneuver was anticipated minutes before it happened. This is impossible, Admiral Kale whispered as he watched his carefully planned battle formation crumble. His ships were moving predictably into positions that the humans had already identified as tactically disadvantageous. Captain Lee's image appeared on screens. Throughout the alien fleet, his weathered face showing no emotion as he observed their growing panic. "This is not conquest," he announced, his words carrying to thousands of alien ears. "This is evolution." Around the massive alien armada, ships began powering down their weapons and broadcasting surrender signals. Others simply turned and fled, their crews unable to cope with facing an enemy that operated beyond their understanding of reality. "The galaxy created this situation when it chose to cage us like animals," Lee continued, his voice echoing through space. "You assumed we were primitive because we hadn't developed space travel when you first discovered us. You never considered that we might have been developing something far more dangerous." Commander Kim reported from her station as more alien vessels surrendered or retreated. "Captain, 60% of their fleet is now non-combat effective. The remaining vessels are attempting to withdraw to minimum safe distance." Lee nodded, watching as the greatest armada in galactic history dissolved into chaos. "Now you discover what happens when the Predator escapes its enclosure." The terror was complete. An entire galaxy had just learned that technological superiority meant nothing when facing an enemy that understood patience, preparation, and the psychological weaknesses of their targets. The humans hadn't just built better weapons, they had built a better understanding of warfare itself. The age of alien dominance was over, ended not by brute force, but by intelligence, cunning, and the methodical preparation that had turned humanity's greatest weakness into their most powerful weapon. The great crystal dome of the Galactic Council chambers had never seen anything like this. 3 months after humanity's arrival, the ancient hall that had witnessed thousands of years of alien diplomacy now buzzed with a tension that everyone could feel. Representatives from 17 different species sat in their designated areas, but today they weren't the ones making decisions. Captain Lee Min-ho walked slowly down the central aisle, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Behind him followed a delegation of human officers each one carrying themselves with the quiet confidence of those who had fundamentally changed the balance of power in the galaxy. The aliens watched them with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. The chamber itself was a marvel of alien architecture. Crystalline walls rose hundreds of meters overhead, their surfaces reflecting light in patterns that created a sense of infinite space. Floating platforms held the various alien delegations, each positioned according to ancient protocols that had governed galactic politics for millennia. But today, those protocols meant nothing. Admiral Kale sat in what had once been the position of highest honor, reserved for the Council's military commander. His scaled face showed the weariness of someone who had seen his entire worldview shattered. Beside him, representatives from the major galactic powers shifted nervously in their seats, still processing how completely their understanding of the universe had changed. Lee stopped at the center of the chamber, where a holographic podium materialized around him. His weathered face remained calm as he looked up at the assembled aliens, many of whom had once considered humanity to be nothing more than primitive savages. "The old order is finished," he announced, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's advanced acoustics. "Earth sought neither your destruction nor your submission. We never wanted to rule over you. We wanted something much simpler. We wanted respect." Commander Kim Yunseo stepped forward, carrying a crystalline data core that contained the new Galactic Charter. The document had been written over the past 3 months, combining human efficiency with input from every major alien species. But unlike previous galactic agreements, this one had been written with humanity holding the position of strength. "The quarantine protocols that kept Earth isolated are abolished," Lee continued, his words causing several alien representatives to shift uncomfortably. "Trade agreements will be established on equal terms, with humanity having full access to galactic commerce and technology exchange." A murmur ran through the alien delegations. For centuries, they had controlled who could access advanced technology, who could travel between star systems, and who could participate in galactic civilization. The idea of sharing that access with humanity was difficult for many to accept. Lee's expression hardened slightly as he addressed their concerns. "Most importantly, a new enforcement doctrine has been implemented. Humanity will serve as protectors of this galaxy, not as conquerors seeking to dominate, but as guardians against external threats and internal oppression." Lieutenant Park Soo-jin activated a massive holographic display that filled the center of the chamber. The three-dimensional map showed the entire galaxy, but now it looked very different from the political maps the aliens were used to seeing. Human vessels were positioned at strategic points throughout known space, like sentinels watching over the major trade routes and population centers. Monitoring stations had been established in previously empty systems, their sensors capable of detecting threats from light years away. Most impressive of all were the early warning networks that now connected every inhabited system in the galaxy. Any species that attempts to subjugate or quarantine others will face the same systematic response you have witnessed, Lee explained, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "We have proven that we can operate undetected in your space, that we can neutralize your defenses, and that we can reshape galactic civilization when necessary." The alien representatives sat in stunned silence. The display showed a level of strategic planning and implementation that should have taken decades to accomplish. Yet humanity had restructured the entire galaxy's defense network in just 3 months. Commander Kim stepped up to the podium, her scientific background evident in the precision of her presentation. "Our monitoring systems are already detecting unusual activity in the void between galaxies. Long-range sensors show signs of movement that suggest external threats may be approaching. The galaxy will need unified defense capabilities." This revelation sent shockwaves through the chamber. The aliens had always assumed that threats would come from within their own galaxy, from conflicts between known species. The idea of external threats from beyond their borders was terrifying. Lee nodded grimly. "For too long, this galaxy has been divided by old grudges and territorial disputes. Species have wasted resources fighting each other while ignoring the larger universe around them. That ends now." Lieutenant Park activated another section of the display, showing communication networks that now connected every corner of known Space. Unlike the old systems that had been controlled by various alien governments, these networks were maintained by human technology and operated under human oversight. "The galaxy screamed in terror when we arrived," Lee said, his voice carrying through the new communication system to billions of beings across thousands of worlds. "But now, it can rest in peace. Earth stands watch." As the council session ended, the alien representatives began filing out of the chamber. Many moved slowly, still processing the magnitude of what had happened. The species they had dismissed as primitive barbarians had not only defeated their combined military might, but had completely restructured galactic civilization in a matter of months. Admiral Cale paused at the chamber's exit, turning back to look at the human delegation. "Captain Lee," he called out, his voice carrying across the vast space. "What happens now?" Lee met his gaze steadily. "Now we do what humans have always done best, Admiral. We adapt, we learn, and we prepare for whatever comes next. The galaxy is under new management, but that doesn't mean the challenges are over. In the depths of space, the human fleet maintained its vigilant patrol. Sleek vessels moved silently through the void, their sensors constantly scanning for threats, both known and unknown. The technology that had once been humanity's secret weapon was now the galaxy's shield against whatever dangers might emerge from the darkness between stars. The aliens had learned to whisper with respect rather than scream in terror. The new age had begun, and humanity stood ready to face whatever challenges it might bring. The end.